Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is the third part of What If Issei Was Never Resurrected. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like the video. Also share this video with your friends. Let's start the video. The town Kuo. In Japan, Kuo Academy, the black-clothed figure was standing in the middle of the club room belonging to the Occult Research Club. He was able to get in completely unnoticed, taking everybody by surprise, and would have been able to leave in the same way, if he wanted. His method of teleportation was completely different from anything the supernaturals here knew. He could just appear right inside the building and only be seen when it was already too late. Like this time. The group of devils was caught completely off guard when he was suddenly standing inside their rooms. Yet they were still trying to put up a fight as they saw his intentions and were of course failing. He saw the devil he was holding onto by her throat was struggling to break free. Another one, the dark-haired fallen angel hybrid, he had literally nailed at the door with multiple spears made out of ice that he had conjured and that were now rammed through her chest and stomach. He could just see the last bit of life leaving her eyes. The smaller white-haired girl was already lying lifeless to his feet. One of the last who was still left, the blonde knight, was raising his sword wordlessly and moved to attack him. He barely reacted to the insignificant threat. The man just made a small gesture and Yuto Kiba's body was ripped apart from the inside out. He turned his attention back to the devil he was holding. She had tried to use an attack against him, but he stopped it before she even began. He had made sure to let her watch how he had easily destroyed her peerage without even trying. Before he broke her neck and let her dead body fall to the ground. He was looking down at her. Resurrected, her queen, her knight, her rook, all eliminated. Then he turned to the last two people who were left in the room. The small blonde girl Ossia Argento. She wasn't a fighter, so he decided to make her end quick. He conjured his own sword into his hand and separated her head from her body. And to the last one, who had been screaming desperately the entire time, when he had seen what the stranger had been doing. The last remaining member of the peerage, Issei Hyodo, who was being pressed against the wall by the powers of the attacker's sacred gear. He could have easily finished off this one like the others, but his masters had told him that they had still interest in him. This here was one of the universes where Resurrected had succeeded in turning Issei Hyodo into her servant. "You bastard," the boy yelled, trying in vain to hold back his tears. Why did you do this? He was trying to break free, but the blood in his veins was being controlled by his enemy's power and holding him back. Hyodo was draining power from his own boosted gear, but his body was far from able to reach a high enough strength to overcome the invisible grip. Why? The man repeated his question. Does there really need to be a reason to finish off a group of devils? He asked casually. But then a grin formed on his face. You, Issei growled in a nearly blind rage. The stranger was only looking at him. But then another thought was coming to the man's mind. Actually, Issei Hyodo, he said, you should thank me. Thank you. He shouted. You killed my friends. You. Friends? The man asked curiously. You are the Red Dragon Emperor, as I have been told. You should stand on your own and not be enslaved to an arrogant and spoiled devil. Or bound to people who would only slow you down, he said with a glance at Asia's body. I will kill you. I swear I will kill you, no matter what I have to do, Issei screamed. The being who had just wiped out the entire Grimoire peerage was just returning his gaze with slight amusement. Issei, have you ever asked yourself one question? He stated. How was Resurrected able to place a summoning flyer on you during the date where you were killed, unless she knew what was going to happen the entire time? Issei froze. The boy understood where this was going. He was clearly not as stupid as you got the impression. She had someone in place to take photos of you. Just to show them to you later. How come she did nothing to warn you or keep you from getting killed? The stranger questioned. Unless of course she actually intended for you to die. No. That isn't true. Bucho wouldn't do something like that, Issei exclaimed. Even now you deny the truth, even if it is thrown in your face. It is kind of pathetic actually, the man responded. I truly don't know why my associates asked me to spare a fool like you. Your so-called friends have been lying to you every day. The only true innocent under them was Asia, but of course she happened to be in my way. As he heard this words, the rage returned to Issei's face. But before anything more was said, the door was being slammed open. Just like he had expected, the other devil peerage of this town had arrived, after they had realized that something was wrong. It had taken them only a few minutes to come here. But a few minutes were all the entire fight, and his conversation with Hyodo had cost him. Sona Citri and her queen were standing in the door, with the entire rest of her peerage right behind them. Rias, she called out as she saw the body of her friend on the ground and her massacred servants lying around her. Who are you? She shouted at the intruder. Who has sent you? Her fury rivaled that Issei had shown a few moments ago. For Sona, who was normally always calm and composed, nearly emotionless at the outside, this was very unusual. But given the situation, nobody was surprised. Who has sent me? That is a good question, he replied. I am told to give you my greetings from Azazel, the man said. Or was it Michael? I am not sure anymore. He grinned. You. Her rage became even more visible since the attacker who had just murdered her friend and her servants was obviously toying with her. Don't think that you can play with us. Who had sent you? She yelled. But the man only laughed. Oh, and Hyodo. I am afraid you won't kill me. In fact, you will never see me again after this day. Even if you traveled to the end of your world, you won't find me, he stated. He was telling the truth. His counterpart in this world, he knew, had been dead for many years, and the current owner of the sacred gear he was using was a 9-year-old child in this reality. He would leave this universe and had no intention to return. There was no way they would find anything about him. Tsubaki, Megumi, Benya, go, Sona ordered for her queen and her 2 knights to move. But it was already too late. He vanished right in front of them. There had been no magic circle to see. It was a form of transportation spell they had never seen before. The man left Sona Citri's peerage and the mentally broken Issei Hyodo behind. XXXXXXX moments later he reappeared, somewhere at the other side of Japan. He let his eyes and also his mental senses wander around, taking in the landscape. He was alone. Just like he had expected, there was no other person around in miles. Another mission. All too easy, he thought. Just a few minutes later he could feel the telepathic call reaching him. Yes, he answered. As I see in your thoughts that you have finished the mission, the voice who had been calling him stated. It was went as planned, I presume. Of course, this young devils were no opponents for me. I even added a little bonus with this Issei Hyodo you have mentioned, he replied. It was actually somewhat boring, he commented. In this world here, Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels, had found evidence about the plot that Kokubile had planned against him and had him arrested before he could actually start it. This was secretly a great progress for Azazel's plans to end the conflict between the 3 factions. Since Kokubile had been the greatest hindrance under the Grigori leaders for peace. But this went against the interests of his masters. They wanted the conflict to continue for longer. Now, with the sister of one of the Mao killed and the other 2 factions automatically under suspicion, Azazel's plans for peace won't have a real chance to succeed for the visible future. Beside that, Rias Grimori was also supposed to marry another high-ranked high-class devil from the Phoenix family in a few weeks from now on in an arranged political marriage. Of course this will now never come to pass. This little fact might cause additional unrest under the pureblood devil families. It wouldn't be much, but maybe worth considering. He had purposely dropped hints that either one of the other faction leaders could be responsible for the hit. Or maybe some splinter group that only wanted to discriminate them. But in truth it was none of all these. No, the true mastermind behind this attack was a force that these foolish creatures could not even imagine. And while for them the death of the sister of one of the devil kings might be a great thing, for him it was not more than a low-grade mission. Barely more than a waste of his time. It seems, Agent Crossell, that you don't think that your talents are properly challenged, the voice addressed him again. I have another mission for you that you might find more interesting. It was the voice of a woman. He had actually never physically met her, but he of course knew her by reputation. She was one of the lords, the heads of their organization, personally responsible for the destruction of entire worlds, and more. What kind of mission will that be? He wanted to know. One that will bring you back to your home universe. Your time of outside missions is now over and we want you to take care of things in your world from now on, she told him. Outside mission. This meant in his case someone who was given different tasks in different parallel universes that were not his own. Like he had done it for the last few years. I see. So this is a promotion, he mentioned. Yes. You are from now on personally responsible for our plans on your home dimension's versions of Earth and their heaven and underworld. I see, he replied. But certainly you also have a specific task in mind with that I should begin. Indeed I have. Your first target is ironically the counterpart of the same person you have just been dealing with, Issei Hyodo. And here I thought I finally had a challenge, he remarked. Don't be so hasty. This version of Issei Hyodo has a short time ago been recruited by the enemy. So he is a member of the Guardians, he stated. Yes, and that is not everything. The one who is his partner at the moment, the one who is instructing him, is nobody else than the angel who once fell for your sake. Her, he said. By our information, it also seems that these two are beginning to recruit others and maybe build up a team around them. You are right, he replied. This is interesting. He would very soon return to his world. This was what he had been waiting for, he thought. It wouldn't take long and he would come to realize his own plans. A few miles from Kuo, back in the regular world. Issei was in a pretty awkward situation. He tried to remember when he had ever met a girl named Irina. Issei. You know her? Asia questioned. If he was honest, she seemed somewhat familiar to him, very familiar actually on a closer look. But he couldn't quite place it. Still, if he had ever known a girl like that, he would certainly remember her, right? Especially one who was willing to throw her arm around him like this on sight. Irina, how do you know this person? Her fellow exorcist asked as well. She too had lowered her hood and they saw that it was a young girl with short bluish hair and a bright yellow strand in it. Yes, Issei. Who is this? He heard Rainer asking him as well. Don't you want to introduce us? Her tone was sounding sweet, at the outside. She was using the same voice as in her alter ego as Yuma, the same one like on their date. But he could hear a certain kind of malice swinging with it. Suddenly it hit him. Irina. You mean Irina Shido? He asked. That is you. Yes, of course it is me, she said. Didn't you recognize me? We have known each other since we were children after all. Yes, but you are a girl, he stammered. I didn't. I never realized that you were a girl. If he thought the situation had been awkward before, with this statement he had made it 10 times worse. The dumbfounded expression everyone around was looking at him for a moment, could have been out of some comedy TV show. Then, after a second as they fully registered what they had just heard, Rainer, Rias and even Garilnir instantly broke out into laughter. Akano was a bit quieter, but still laughing. Kiba looked as if he could barely hold himself back. Even Asia was giggling a little. Issei, that was just great. You actually believed she was a boy. I thought something like that doesn't happen in real life, Rainer said, still chuckling, while she was still trying to get a hold on herself. And I thought you of all people would know the difference between boys and girls. I see you are already back to laughing about me, Issei commented dryly. The fallen angel froze. She suddenly looked uncomfortable, even hurt, and somehow afraid. He remembered he had not said that he had forgiven her, at least yet. But why should she even care that much about this? I am sorry, Issei. I didn't mean it like this, she exclaimed quickly. It was clear that all what had happened over the day, especially the revelation about one of her leaders' betrayal from a few minutes ago, had really gotten to her. He was looking at her for a few moments. Don't worry. It is okay, he told her. I admit it was funny. He smiled. He was actually smiling at her, he thought. What was he thinking? She was his killer and now he was standing here, placating her, actually worrying about her feelings and even trying to calm her down. Still, it was as if the impact of what had happened had turned the cynical and arrogant fallen angel that he had got to know into an overly sensitive, fragile and very easy to hurt girl. Well, at least temporary, and a part of him couldn't help hating seeing her like this. Another small part of him, however, he admitted, was glad seeing her so vulnerable. She could surely not be able to hurt him when she was like that. Yet another part of him felt ashamed for even thinking in that way. Anyway, not matter how he felt. He had literally seen her turn into a crying mess a few minutes ago, and he knew the last thing they needed was her breaking down again right in the middle of the meeting. He noticed that Rainer had indeed calmed down and was even returning his smile. As he turned back around to the two exorcists, he realized that Irina and her partner were staring at them. It somehow came to him what kind of display he and Rainer must have just made, and that right in front of them. Issei, why are you here with a group of devils and fallen angels? What do you have to do with these people? She asked him. And what in the world has happened to you? She yelled suddenly after taking a closer look at him. Issei realized that he hadn't thought about hiding his powers anymore after this surprise. Both of the exorcists now easily noticed the large power he was radiating. Damn it, Issei and Gariel, though nearly at the same time. They had hoped that whoever the church would send would not pay much attention to him next to the devils and fallen angels with them. To them he would have been just another human who cooperated with the other factions for one reason or the other. How in the world were they supposed to know that his childhood friend of all people would be one of them? They must have had the worst kind of bad luck here. Well, maybe not completely. After all, Issei now looked clearly happy to see her again, now that he knew who she was and even finally figured out her gender. Gariel admitted even she could barely hold herself back from laughing once again when she thought about it. She actually grinned a bit for a moment. If she was honest, she had hoped to keep Issei's involvement in all this a secret, at least for now. The truth was, the Vatican and the heads of the Protestant and Orthodox churches knew about the existence of the Guardians and had at least some ties with them. But she would have preferred if the fact that they were cooperating with the Grigori, and especially the agreement she had made with resurrected, would be kept quiet about. She wasn't quite sure how the church would react to these things. Issei, don't tell me you have joined them. Irina exclaimed. So much for that, Gariel thought. Irina, why else would he be here with them? Her partner stated. Your friend has obviously joined one of the other factions, and since they are enemies of God, we will have to consider him one too. You cannot mean that, Zenobia. Issei is my oldest friend. There has to be a reason for this, Irina insisted. For a short moment Gariel was tempted to reveal who they really were. But that would make everything even more complicated right now. Especially with the devils around. If we are enemies of the church, why are we handing over one of the most wanted stray exorcists to you? She commented instead. That doesn't mean much. You will have your own reasons for it, the girl replied. Oh, I am Zenobia Quarta, by the way. My name is Gariel. She returned the introduction. You already know of my partner Issei Hyodo, and this is Rainer. I am Rias Grimori. This is my queen Akano Himahima, my knight Yuto Kiba, and my rook Kaneko Tuju, Rias stated on behalf of her own group. I see, the exorcist named Zenobia replied. Issei, tell me, what is with you and that fallen angel? Irina demanded. He felt Rainer stepping forward from right behind him and laying one of her arms around his shoulder. What is with us? That is quite simply, she said, I am his girlfriend. The dumbfounded expression the two exorcists had now was truly priceless. Issei himself was also not sure how he felt about this declaration. So that is the explanation, Irina called out. This fallen angel has seduced you. She was now literally staring daggers at Rainer, and both Issei and Gariel saw that her hand was uncomfortably close to her sword. Just what they needed, a young girl starting a battle out of jealousy. No, it is truly not what you think, Issei told her. But they all were suddenly interrupted. It was Fried, who was still being guarded by Kiba and Akano and had followed their entire exchange so far in slight amusement. Now he started to laugh loudly. Girlfriend. Ha. That's just great. Do you know why your friend suddenly has this kind of power? Why his sacred gear had been activated? The shackled stray exorcist yelled. His girlfriend here has killed him with her own hands just a few days ago. I don't know how they have brought him back, but that pretty much, well, he grinned. Irina's expression had now turned downright murderous, and her hand was now truly on her weapon. What? She said in a dangerous low tone. Oh, but that is not even all, Fried continued. This girl there. Do you know who that is? He yelled. This is Ossia Argento. Yes, the same nun who was excommunicated because she had healed a devil. And now she is here with them. What do you think? Maybe you should better kill her now, before the devils or fallen angels manage to corrupt her completely. He asked them, grinning. The gaze of the two exorcists had now turned to Asia, who they had not actually paid attention to so far. But now that had instantly changed. Issei and Gariel both clenched their teeth. Fried had recognized her. This was what they had feared. And Asia kneeling him in the balls earlier had certainly not helped his motivation to keep his mouth shut. The main reason why they had come up with the disguise and the false name in the first place was to keep her identity from the devils. But now he had blurted it out, not only in front of them but also the two exorcists. This could be bad. Not that they didn't trust themselves to defend Asia if these two really decided to attack her. But with blowing her secret right in front of Rias Peerage and the church agents, their entire deception to fake her death would essentially become meaningless. You won't actually listen to this lunatic, right, Irina? Issei asked her, moving himself between them and the disguised ex-nun. This is my foster sister Maya. She isn't this Ossia Argento or whatever person. And Rainer. She wouldn't hurt me. He said weakly. He really wished he sounded more convincing. But he just couldn't bring the words out. He admitted he hated lying to her like this, and actually claiming that Rainer had never hurt him. It felt like throwing salt into an open wound. But they couldn't let this escalate right now. Irina was still standing before him with her hand on her sword, struggling with herself. You have to admit, she has a certain resemblance to Ossia Argento, Zenobia stated. Except the hair and the glasses, it could easily be her. And if someone like Ossia Argento was threatening to join the other factions, it would be better if we take her out. Irina now turned back to her partner, looking a bit uncomfortable about the suggestion. But she didn't say something against it either. Well, that might be. Rainer of all people spoke up, but this girl here is not Ossia Argento. Why should we believe you, fallen angel? Zenobia asked. Tell me, why is this Asia even a topic to begin with? Because of her sacred gear, twilight healing, right? Yes, Zenobia replied. A power that can heal anyone, even devils and fallen angels. That is why we should do anything to keep it out of their hands. It seems you are a bit too late then. Rainer smirked. May I? She reached out to the blade of Irina's sword. I just want to show you something. She let her hand glide lightly over the sharp edge of the weapon, leaving a small but visible cut, and then instantly healed it, radiating a greenish light. The two exorcists looked shocked at the display. You should know that my former team had found Ossia Argento some time ago, Rainer said. As you surely know, no sacred gear user is capable of surviving the removal of their gear. She can. TB Asia, because she is dead. We killed her, she lied. You damned bitch, Fried growled at her at Rainer. I don't know how you have done this. But you can't fool me like those idiots here. Oh, shut up, Selzen, she replied. And by the way, Fried, are you really in a position to call anyone a bitch? I mean, all chained up like you are, she said with a grin. The stray exorcist was just glaring at her murderously. But he was not the only one. You killed her to get her sacred gear, Irina yelled, and you Issei. You are with her, even if you know that she is a murderer. She even killed you if what that stray exorcist said is true. How could you? Have you not just considered to kill this girl yourself a minute ago? Gariel commented. That is something completely different, Irina replied. Of course, it always is, she remarked dryly. But this is not the matter right now. You are here to bring this guy, she pointed at Fried, in, and not to let him play us against each other. He's obviously only trying to distract us all. As much as I hate to say it, but the fallen angel is right, Rias told them sternly. We are here to hand over Fried Selzen to you. Here he is. If you are not interested and rather fight about other matters, then we can always take him back and you can explain this to your superiors. Okay, Zenobia said. We have a transport vehicle at the other side of this forest, about 1 mile from here. I will come with you to assist you, Gariel stated, hoping for a chance to be alone with the two agents of the church. You can return to the town then, she said to Issei and the others. I will meet you later like we have agreed to, she added with a side glance to Rias. It seems being an arrogant devil actually has its advantages, right? She said quietly to her. Just remember our agreement, fallen angel, she replied, visible annoyed by the comment. Neither Irina or Zenobia resisted Gariel's offer to accompany them. They knew all too well how dangerous Selzen was and that they could need the help. As they were leaving together, the others were about to return to the town. Both groups on their own. Rainer. Issei whispered to her as they stepped closer together for the transport circle, remembering how she had covered for Asia. Thank you. He said the words that he had never thought he would. XXXXXXX. The abandoned church for the last day. Not much had happened for the remaining fallen angels. Rainer had left for the headquarters last night, after she had told them that she had disposed of the nun's body. As their new member, Gariel had told them, she had died despite her efforts to improve the ritual to keep her alive. Well, it was sad. It would have certainly been a good thing if they could have removed sacred gears with the users surviving. A few might have actually volunteered to get rid of them. Still, it was nothing to shed tears over. They had gotten what they intended to after all. Just a few hours later in the same night, Gariel herself had left as well without saying much. As Calawarner had asked her, she had just stated that she had gotten another mission and won't return. Since she had not really been a member of their team in the first place, it was also no real loss. Another one who had not returned was Fried Selzen. Someone else they would clearly not miss. He had just not come back from the search for Ossia Argento. Maybe he had run into Issei Hyodo and was actually defeated by him, as unlikely as it sounded that a boy who had just activated his sacred gear would beat an experienced exorcist. But going by Calawarner's state after her fight with him, he wasn't exactly a weakling anymore. Or maybe Selzen had picked a fight with the devils and was killed by them. As they knew him, that was also good possible. A number of the other stray exorcists had left as well this morning. They had only been here for the single purpose to assist and guard the ritual and were now going back to other tasks. The ones who remained in the church were Donasik, Calawarner, Mittelt and the rest that was left to their hired group of stray exorcists. The devils had been quiet and they had not actually seen much of them. For the greatest part of the day, not much had happened, until about half an hour ago. 2 messages had arrived only a short time apart. The first was an official announcement from the headquarters. It was telling them that Rainer had been assigned to a special mission on direct orders of Lord Azazel himself, and that Donasik was promoted to team leader. Well, good for both of them, he thought. It seemed that Rainer had finally succeeded with her wish to raise Azazel's attention. Furthermore, it only said that their team should stand back and wait for further orders. So it was just sitting around and doing nothing. None of them particular like that. This was until the second message arrived. This one was a direct order from Lord Kokabeel. A smile formed on Donasik's face while he was reading it. Finally, some action. Calawarner. Mittelt, he called out. Come, we have something to do. XXXXXXX Kuo Academy. The same evening, Rias and her peerage had returned less than an hour ago. Like she had already expected, Grafia contacted her again only a short time later. And also the reason for her call was no surprise, given what Sona had told her. She had to admit, she was happier than ever before that she had accepted the deal that the fallen angel with Issei had offered her. A short time later, Grafia appeared in person. But as she told them, she would not be the only one. Razor Phoenix, as it turned out, has for some reason started to press for the engagement between them. She had instantly sent a message to her new, well, she guessed she should call them allies. It was not that she truly trusted that fallen angel Issei was working with. But this might be her best and quite possible only chance if things continued like this. Tell me everything about this Razor that you can, Gariel had asked her. Only facts. Don't say something only because you don't like him. The better my picture of the man is, the better for you. That was what she had told her. Now the time had come and Rias could only hope that everything would work out. She and her peerage members were now sitting together in their club room, waiting. Only Grafia was still standing, acting her part as a maid of the Grimoire house. Grafia, Rias addressed her, there is one last thing. 2 more friends of us will arrive here soon. I wanted them to be present for this meeting. 2 friends Rias Sama? She questioned. This meeting should have actually only been the business of you, Razor Sama, and your servants and houses. I know, but it is important for me to have them here. Grafia, I have one request. Yes. The maid asked. Whatever you hear when they are talking with Razor, don't say anything, and even more, don't attack them. Why should I attack your friends, Ria-sama? They are not members of our faction, she told her vaguely. Nor are they regular humans. Rias, what are you planning? Grafia asked now. Concern was to hear in her voice. Just promise me, she repeated. Okay. If that is your wish, she stated, still not sounding exactly happy. Thank you. A minute later, another magic circle showed up on the ground before them, this one in the style of the House of Phoenix, and a blonde-haired young man appeared. Rias, my love, how wonderful to see you again, Razor greeted her, his voice sounding more than smug. Kuo Academy. Rias, my love, how wonderful to see you again, Razor greeted her. Razor Phoenix was looking like a young man in his early 20s. Being a devil, it was of course hard to say how old he truly is. The way he had greeted Rias seemed friendly, at the first look. But something about his tone seemed off. It was something about the exaggerated manner in which he spoke. As if he was saying it more for the purpose of being heard by others than actually meaning it. Razor. She returned his greeting formally and in one on her part quite obviously uncaring tone. What do you want? She asked the rhetorical question. Grafia had already informed her about Razor's reasons for his visit. My dear, shouldn't that be obvious? I wanted to see you, he replied. Oh really? I have heard something a bit different, she countered. Aren't you here because you try to fasten up this engagement that our families have decided for us? She placed the pronunciation on the part "our families," pointing out that it was not her decision. Now my dear, he said, if we are to marry, why not do it as quick as possible? He sat down right next to her on the couch. Very close, more than it would be considered socially proper in most situations, especially here since she clearly didn't want him to do it, and laid his arms around her. Rias was just sitting there motionless, visibly stiffer than before. But Razor didn't seem to notice that, or he did not care and let his hands wander over her body. A more than just annoyed expression showed on her face at his behavior. Razor, I have told you this before and I am saying it again. I am not marrying you. I don't like you. In fact, I despise you, she told him. Well, in this case I should remind you that it is not truly your choice. Our families have made an official agreement, and as the only daughter of Grimoire you will have to follow it, he declared grimly. Part of his friendly facade was slipping now. But only for a short moment. He put it back into place very quickly and smiled at her again. Of course nobody in the room fell for it. Rias was about to reply something else, but before she could say anything, there was a knock at the door. Come in. We have been waiting for you, she said loudly. Razor looked up in surprise. But the others, Rias' servants and even Grafia of course already knew that she was waiting for someone. XXX. You know you don't need to do this, Gariel had said to him a few minutes ago. Your agreement was you stay with us for one mission and then you are given a choice to stay or leave, and that mission has been fulfilled, she reminded him. Both of our direct targets are with us. We have made a positive contact with the Grigori, and even more important, we have discovered information about the organization we are hunting for. If you want to, you could just leave now. I know this. But the truth is, I don't want to leave. You should understand. I am not even sure how to say it. He sighed. Here I have the chance to be something more than just a perverted outsider. And it also allows me to protect people like Asia. XXX. He remembered how Asia and Rainer had arrived back at his home after the meeting with Irina and her partner. To say that his parents were a little surprised that there was another girl with him beside his new foster sister Maya, would be an understatement. Of course Rainer, who had taken her human form, introduced herself as Yuma Amano and once again as his girlfriend, and once again he just stood by, not even able to say anything. Issei knew he had to speak a few words with her soon. His parents of course were looking at them slack-jawed, before congratulating him enthusiastically after their few moments of shock about her declaration. Why? He asked himself. Why had he not said anything to contradict Rainer? Right afterwards, however, his parents had another surprise as they told him that Murayama of all people had been there and asked for him. A few days ago, his reaction to this would have been to jump into the conclusion that the captain of the Kendo club could actually be interested in him. That she maybe actually liked it when he was watching her in the locker rooms, and that he could maybe get the chance to get his hands on her breasts. And he would have spent the rest of the day dreaming about her "opie," and the chance to get her into bed. Now he was thinking about all that a bit different. Of course he was still interested in all of that. But the reason that she was here was most likely that she had noticed that something was off about him. Maybe she had even seen something strange what he was doing. He fully intended to talk with her as soon as he would have the chance, and that without trying to hit on her. If she showed too much interest in him as things were now, she could bring herself into danger and he didn't want that. So he would do something about it. The times when he had let events just roll over him and people get the better of him were over. As Gariel had said it, start using your brain, or others will use you instead. XXX. Besides that, I would miss you if you were no longer around, Issei continued. You are one of my few actual friends beside Matsuda and Motohama, and I have now the chance to spend time with Irina again. Since she is now an exorcist, this would be difficult otherwise, and, he hesitated, not even quite sure what he had wanted to say. Ah, does that mean you will be less perverted in the future? She asked him with a sly grin. Don't count on it, he replied in a very similar tone. So part of why you want to stay around me is that you still want to get under the sheets with me, she remarked lasciviously. She was definitely spending too much time with him, she thought. As I have said, if you want to have sex with me, we can talk about it. Or maybe, as things are now, maybe we should first ask your girlfriend. Issei froze. I see. You would miss Rainer as well, right? She commented with just a small bit of sarcasm. What? Why are you saying something like that? He said grimly. Issei, I don't need any psychic powers to see how conflicted you are when it comes to her. Not that I would still be able to read your thoughts if you didn't want it. You have already grown too strong for that. Issei stayed silent for a few moments. To be honest, he finally said, I am not quite sure what to make of her. She had turned on me and killed me, she had betrayed me, and now she is already back to telling everyone that she is my girlfriend. What the hell I am supposed to think? Have you considered that her actions might be so contradictory because she could be in a similar situation when it comes to you? She asked. Maybe, he admitted, but I find it just as likely that she just wants to get back into good terms with me. Now that she knows that I carry the boosted gear, he stated, and hopes to wrap me around her finger again, he said bitterly. That might be part of it, she responded. But believe me, she had already been acting strange when it comes to you long before she found out about Drake. As soon as she found out that you were alive again, she started to get, well, emotional whenever you were brought up. That doesn't mean that I have to trust her or forgive her, he said firmly. No. But I am getting an impression that you actually want to trust and forgive her. By what I have heard, she has still been calling herself your girlfriend twice now and you have said nothing to contradict her. Issei frowned. The truth is both times I didn't get a word out. Whenever I look at her, or when she is talking to me, I can't hate her, not really. But then I always have to think about what she did to me and I am getting so angry that I just want to punch her in the face. Maybe you should do that. The both you might feel better afterwards, she retorted. That is not funny, he told her. No, it isn't, she replied. What Rainer did had caused a psychotic trauma for you. I would be surprised if it hadn't. You should talk to someone about your fears, like you are doing right now, she told him, and sooner or later you will need to confront your fears. That makes it a good thing that the source of them is right with us, right? She asked him. Issei said nothing. I cannot tell you if you should forgive her or not. Or what kind of a relationship you want to have with her. Or that exorcist girl for that matter. Or to Asia, she pointed out. But what I can tell you is this, if you want to get over your problems, you will have to talk to her sooner or later, and I really mean it. And even if it is only to tell her to go and fuck herself. But if you just ignore her presence, you are only dragging the problem out. They were now standing in front of the door of the club room. Come in. We have been waiting for you, they heard Ria's voice after knocking on the door. They opened and stepped inside. XXX they saw that beside Rias and her peerage were two people were present. The silver-haired woman in the maid outfit only gave them a short look. The blond young man who was standing in the center of the room, however, seemed very surprised to see them, and not happy at all. Hello, Rias. Gariel greeted her casually, in a familiar tone. You wanted to talk with us. What in the world is this fallen angel and that human doing here? He exclaimed loudly. How do they dare to just walk into our meeting as if they have any right to be here? He asked. Why have your servants not attacked them as soon as they entered the building? He ranted. And how can they even have the insolence to greet a high-class devil so casually like this? He hissed. Issei couldn't help himself, but he already hated this guy. Despite knowing him only for a few seconds. But his short rant was already more than enough. If he ever met someone who had the word snob written on his face, it had to be him. If he was a typical example of a devil, he was more than happy that he had not joined them. To that came the way he spoke to Gariel, who was after all his trainer and had quickly become a good friend. Rias, throw these two cretins out, Razor told her. And you fallen angel filth should be thankful that I have more important things to do than to kill you, he said dismissively in Gariel's and Issei's direction. Be thankful for it. These cretins Razor are two of my associates and they are invited guests, Rias replied. It annoyed her to no end that Razor dared to give her orders in her own home. In opposite to certain people who just show up here unasked and uninvited and then make demands, she added with a clear hint to Razor himself. Issei, Gariel, welcome, we have been expecting you, she said to them. Her fiancé glared at her for a short moment. Your choice of associates, he said the words with distaste, is very questionable, my dear. I will have to correct that after we have been married, he stated. As if the marriage would give him the right to dictate who she can see and can't. Rias' anger at him was not truly taking overhand. You think you can just command me around, she yelled. But once again they were interrupted. Oh, a devil is throwing insults at me, Gariel commented theatrically and in a more than mocking tone. I am so hurt. I should probably reply with something nasty now. But I think the word devil alone is already insult enough. Even Grafia visibly flinched a little at what Rias' guest had just said. But she remembered that she had been told not to do anything. No matter what she heard. The rest of the peerage also looked not exactly happy about the comment, but nobody said anything. So this was obviously some part of a plan that Rias was in on. Grafia could only hope that she knew what she was doing. Razor on the other hand was exploding now. You dare to talk to me like this, he literally screamed. I am Razor Phoenix, third son of the House of Phoenix. A low-level fallen angel trash like you don't even deserve to speak to me. That you are a high-class scum doesn't exactly makes it any better, devil, she responded. The members of the Occult Research Club were all listening to the exchange with a bad mood. They heard how her ally was insulting their whole race. But they knew it was all part of the plan. That is enough, Razor shouted. No matter what my foolish betrothed says, I will kill you here and now. Nobody insults a son of the House Phoenix like that and gets away with it. Issei however stepped in front of Gariel and between her and Razor. If you want to attack her, you have to go through me first, he said, playing his role. You talk like that would be a difficult thing, human, he replied with contempt. Razor. He is not a regular human. Issei is the Red Dragon Emperor, Rias spoke up. Is he? And probably an inexperienced and weak one, by the way he looks. Well, maybe then he can provide me with a few minutes of entertainment, he stated haughtily. If you want a fight, I am all in for it, Issei told him confidently. Stop this right now, Rias interfered this time. If you really want to fight each other, I won't stand in your way. But this is neither the time or the place. As you said yourself, Razor, we are in an official meeting. Even if it is one that I had never actually agreed to. Razor calmed down. A little bit at least. You are right, he agreed reluctantly. This is not the place for something like that. Name one and I will be there, Issei replied. I agree, but only under one condition, Razor said with a grin. When I win, this fallen angel here will become my servant. He pointed at Gariel. She really needs a few lessons to respect her better, and I will be glad to provide them. You would make a girl part of a bet? Issei asked angrily. Okay. He was a pervert and admitted it. But this. Why not? Or are you afraid to lose, vermin? Razor responded. We will accept, Gariel answered in his place. If you win, I belong to you and you can teach me all lessons you want. But we shouldn't be the only ones who risk something, right? Or is it that you're afraid? She asked him. Razor fears nothing, he stated proudly. Tell me your conditions and I will accept them. Rias on the other side wanted to cry out in joy. This was working better than she had ever hoped for. Well, to be honest, I don't like the way you treat women, Issei told him. So if I win, you will give up on that marriage, that is clearly not wanted on the other part. But that, he wanted to say something. The marriage is an agreement between the houses of Phoenix and Grimori, he pointed out. I see. It seems he really is afraid, Gariel commented mockingly. Enough. I agree to your terms, Razor called out. Once again he let his pride and his anger overcome him. You mean you accept this as an official challenge to a duel, Razor? Rias asked him. Yes, he answered. You have heard it, Graphia, she said. You should inform my brother and my parents about this when you return to the underworld. You really want to risk your engagement over this challenge, Razor-sama? The maid asked him. Remember, if you accept now as a son of the House of Phoenix, it will be binding. I will, he replied. At some level he realized that he might have just done something stupid or at least reckless. Any challenge from an outsider would and could normally have no effect on the marriage agreement, since it was made between the two houses, unless he accepted the challenge in the name of his house. In this case, honor demanded to follow the conditions. But his pride didn't allow him to back out now. I understand, Graphia replied. Since Rias-sama is obviously not willing to accept the engagement, I was about to offer you the possibility to resolve this conflict through a rating game. But in this case, we will do that as well, Rias exclaimed. Why would you still want to hold a rating game? Graphia asked, surprised. It looks like even Rias has no trust in her "friend," Razor commented. I trust him, she responded. But I am actually glad about this chance to stand up for myself. You talk as if you have actually a chance. You have what? 3 people in your peerage. I have a full set. He made a gesture and another, larger magic circle appeared on the ground before them. And a second later 15 new persons were standing in the room. All of them were young and quite attractive looking women. Is this a peerage or a harem? Issei could not hold himself back from calling out. I admit it has a bit of both of them, Razor downright told them with a smirk on his face. I have truly some of the most beautiful here, haven't I? But that doesn't mean that my ladies aren't powerful fighters as well. Well, someone like Razor has of course more success with the women than a nobody like you can ever hope for. Is that why you have to turn them all into your servants to get them? Issei remarked. This statement caused Razor to once again grimace in anger. I will show you how much these girls cherish me. Ubeluna, he commanded the blue-haired woman in front of his peerage, come here. She followed his order and he drew her into a kiss, right in front of all of them. Issei saw in a mixture of fascination and outrage how he and the woman, who was obviously his queen, actually started to make out, while they all, including Rias, were watching. Even Issei, as perverted as he was, could tell that Razor was just using the woman to rile them all up. Would he ever have sunk as low to use a girl like that? A part of him asked himself. That is truly enough, Razor, Rias stated, outwardly cool, but with noticeable anger. You have accepted the challenges for both the duel and the rating game. With that, I think it is about time for you to go. All what is left is to set a date, right, Graphia? Yes, the maid answered. Razor-sama, since your peerage outnumbers Rias-sama's by far, I propose to hold the rating game in 2 weeks from now on to give her time to prepare, and the duel to follow right afterwards. If your challenger agrees to this terms, of course. She looked at Issei. I do agree, he said. She nodded. Good. And your name, young man? She wanted to know. Issei Hyodo, the current Red Dragon Emperor, he introduced himself. I am sure this name will soon be known to many people, Graphia stated politely. Yes, because everyone will see how I crush him under my boot, Razor remarked. But Graphia just ignored his comment. Then we will meet again in 2 weeks. If you win both, Razor-sama, the preparations for the wedding can start right afterwards. Rias looked up at the last part of her statement, but stayed silent. Now, I hope you will not make it too easy for me, Red Dragon Emperor, Razor said once again confidently. I am looking out for some fun. And you fallen angel. He turned to Gariel. My peerage may be full, but for you I will especially acquire a new piece. Like I said, you are certainly in need for a few lessons in respect, and I am all too willing to give them to you. A grin appeared on his face for a split second. But Issei had seen it and it made him only angrier. So let us go home, girls, Razor addressed the members of his peerage. He joined them and together they vanished inside a new transport circle. As soon as they were gone, the Grimoire heiress showed a reaction nobody would have known or expected from her. Yes, yes, she called out loud and actually threw a fist into the air. Grafia only raised an eyebrow at this. Geez, what an asshole, Issei commented. I can actually understand that you don't want to marry that guy, he said to Rias. It is good that you understand my situation, Rias replied. Yes, he is even worse than you. What? Rias looked at him angrily. A few days ago you were willing to let me get murdered, so that you can force me into your peerage. So don't expect too much sympathy from me, he reminded her. Grafia heard this statement as well, and she intended to ask the young lady in greater detail about this later. Rias frowned. She knew he had a point. She felt the urge to say something else to defend her position, but held herself back. After all, he had already agreed to fight for her. Even if she wished he would do it out of actual loyalty to her and not just as part of a deal. But given all what happened, that might be too much to ask for. Still, Issei was her possible card for freedom, and all what she had needed to do for that was to promise to guard Fried Selzen. Something that she would have gladly done anyway, just to get this guy out of her town. It had worked better than I had ever hoped for, she only commented. Razor reacted in exactly the way we have expected. I know his type. Just challenge their ego and they will accept any conditions you tell them, only to protect their sense of superiority, Gariel responded. Was this rating game really necessary? Issei questioned. Especially since Rias' group is far outnumbered anyway. It was better to convince Razor to give us the 2-week break, Rias stated. Had it been only you, he might have insisted to fight here and now. Exactly, Gariel agreed, and you are still learning to fully control your powers. And what about betting yourself as a slave? Rias asked her. That wasn't exactly part of the plan, wasn't it? It was a move born out of the moment to make sure he agrees. Don't worry, with the speed how Issei improves, in 2 weeks the only way for this Razor to win would be if Issei were asleep during the fight. Let's hope for it. But like I said, I am also glad about this chance to fight for myself. Besides that, I am not sure I share your complete faith in Issei's abilities. So I don't want to rely just on him alone. But didn't you just say that you trust him? A devil who lies, who would have thought? You realize that Razor will spank your ass in the contest, right? She said, grinning to Rias, and he won't even need to wait for your wedding night for it. You, Rias growled. Her face had turned nearly as red as her hair. Somehow this fallen angel just had to use every chance to insult and annoy her. Enough of this. Grafia stepped up. I have tolerated your insults and provocations since they were obviously part of this plan you had. But this is now no longer the case. And besides that, you are hardly in a position to accuse anyone of telling lies, lady, whoever you are. If I remember right, you have done nothing else since you have stepped into this room, the maid declared resolutely. Gariel knew she had her here. Everything from the moment she came into this room had been nothing but a single planned-out deception. Bringing up the habit of the devils to say whatever was convenient for them in any situation would only make her look like a hypocrite. Besides that, she knew who Grafia was. Despite looking harmless, she was the queen of Rias Grimoire's brother Sirzex and one of the strongest devils of the underworld. Picking a fight with her wasn't a good idea unless you were a fallen angel leader or Mao. It seems she let her personal dislike of the devils affect her judgment here. This entire discussion was completely needless anyway. They already got what they wanted. You were right. I was out of line. I am sorry, she said, once again not truly meaning it, but nobody seemed to notice. Rias also appeared to have overcome her anger. It is okay, she replied. By the way, have you thought about my offer about the building that I have shown to you? She wanted to know. We have indeed, Gariel responded. We will take it, Issei said. XXXXXXX. The next day Issei's P.O. V. Issei and his group were now sitting together in the recently magically restored living room of their new base. That was an abandoned villa at the outskirts of the town. He and Gariel had come to the decision that, aside from his home, they needed an actual base here in the area of Kuo. Until a few days ago, this building had been occupied by a stray devil who had been on the loose in this town. That was at least what the devils from Rias Grimori's peerage had told them. They had found and attacked the stray a few days ago, what caused it to flee and abandon its hideout. Rias had told them about this as Gariel had mentioned their need for a base that was close to the city. Of course, it might be that the devil simply had the motive to keep them at a place that she knows of, where they would be inside her reach and she could have an eye on them. But this place here was, as they took a look on it, too well located and fitting for their purposes to refuse it. Gariel had also started to train with Raynor. According to her, she was strong for a two-winged fallen angel. That was obvious since was made group leader. What was lacking were experience in actual combat. Not that surprising with the war being in ceasefire for centuries, and innovative training methods. Both of this they could easily provide. Issei wasn't quite sure how he felt about the very idea of Raynor getting stronger than she already was. He was not even sure how he felt about her being here. Why of all people, Gariel had to recruit her? He asked himself. He knew of course what she had told him. That she was useful. That she knew Kokabeel. That she knew the Gregorian was, thanks to the circumstances, the ideal connection to them. That she was a skilled, but inexperienced and undertrained fighter. At least by their standards. And there were of course the other, less practical reasons. She has it in her to be a better person. The Guardians had already turned people around who were far more gone than she was. That she was already changing. He had heard it all from her. But that wasn't what was on his mind right now. What was going through his head the entire time was simple the fact that his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, he wasn't even sure what to call her, who had betrayed and killed him, was their new recruit. He knew one thing. Gariel was right, he needed to talk to Raynor about what she had said yesterday, beside various other things. This was however not everything that happened yesterday. To everyone's surprise they had two more additions. Irina and Zenobia had joined them as well. XXXXXXX. Irina's P.O. V. Irina Shido was thinking back about the strange events of the last day. At first she and Zenobia had been sent here to take over Fried Selzen from the devils and a mysterious second group. But then things were beginning to happen that she would never have expected. The first was that Issei-kun of all people was with that other group, who she had not seen in years. But what was far worse, at least in her view, was that this group consisted of fallen angels, female fallen angels, very attractive female fallen angels who were leading him away from the right path. At least that was what she had thought at first. Then came the third complete surprise last night. XXX with the assistance of one of the two fallen, they had transported Fried Selzen away. A few hours after they had received him, they handed him over to a small army of exorcists and church soldiers. As soon as they were alone however the fallen angel had told them her secret. She and Issei were in truth not members of the Grigori at all, but of a group that was in fact old allies of the church. At first it was a bit hard to believe, but the fallen angel named Gariel had more than enough information to identify herself without a doubt as they contacted their superiors. And then the next shock followed right away. As the church officials had confirmed that it was truly the organization commonly known as the Guardians they were dealing with, she and Zenobia had gotten their next assignment. They were ordered to join Issei's group and do everything to assist them. XXX not that she wasn't happy to be in one team with him. But still, the thought that an organization that was allied with the church would have fallen angels in their ranks. Especially her, she said to herself, the one who had called herself his girlfriend. By what she had been told, one of them had even seduced and then murdered Issei-kun, only for them to bring him back to life. And now she was right back to seducing him again, and by what she saw, he was letting it happen. Of course it was Fried Selzen who said this and there was no way she could just believe a word from a man like him. But that was the problem. There was also the latest and final surprise of last night. The girl that Issei had called Maya and introduced as his foster sister, she was actually the former nun Asia Argento. This fallen angel Gariel had told them this completely freely, after she had been informed that they would be working together from now on. This and that Argento was now a member of their group. Issei had lied into her face, Irina realized, and that to protect an excommunicated nun of all people. Of course he had a reason. They were simply trying to keep her identity from the devils that were present. But it still hurt. Did that mean his fallen angel girlfriend had actually tried to protect her when she had claimed to have killed Asia? She asked herself. Maybe she wasn't that bad then, for a fallen angel at least, maybe. But that also meant that half of the story that Fried Selzen had told them was actually true. What about the other half? Had this Rainer actually killed him? Issei had denied it, said that it had never happened. But the way he had said this, it sounded more as if he just wanted to defend his girlfriend, as that he truly meant it. Girlfriend. The word alone had somehow started to feel like acid to her. No matter what some people might think, Irina Shido was not stupid. Naive, yes. A bit gullible, sometimes maybe, yes. Stubborn and single-minded, yes. But not stupid. She knew she needed to find out the truth. She knew she needed to talk to Issei-kun once again, and this time he would tell her the truth, the whole truth. And then, what if he told her that he loved the fallen angel? No, she would not simply sit down and accept this, and if she had to seduce Issei-kun by herself, she thought. XXX Asia's P. Oh, V. What Irina didn't know was that she wasn't the only one who had similar thoughts on her mind. Asia, who was in the moment sitting only a few meters beside her, was thinking about the events as well. She was also present as her now former master and new teammate had referred to herself as Issei's girlfriend, and both times he said nothing to contradict her. Did that mean he accepted it? She couldn't help herself but feel a sting whenever she remembered Rainer Sama calling herself that and Issei saying nothing. Asia of course didn't know that her thoughts couldn't be further from the truth. The reason that Issei had not said anything about Rainer's claims was not acceptance. No, it was him struggling with his conflicting emotions towards her, the trauma that his death by her hands had caused, and also simple surprise about what she had said. But he hadn't downright rejected her either. XXXXXXX Their combined group was just going through the events of the last days and recapitulating them for Irina and Zenobia. The two exorcists were sitting on a couch at one side of the room, Rainer and Asia were sitting on the other. Gariel and Issei had just ended their explanation how she had recruited Issei, after her master resurrected him. So that part of the story was really true, Irina thought. Her eyes wandered to Rainer. The look the fallen angel showed as they recapitulated this part of the events seemed to be somehow troubled, and pained. Did that mean that she regretted her actions? That was actually the least thing that could be expected, Irina told herself. But still, what kind of group was that was allied with the church, but let fallen angels and excommunicated nuns join their ranks? She questioned. They just came to the point where Gariel had copied, instead of extracted, like she had claimed, the twilight healing from Asia. Rainer's look as she heard this detail for the first time was truly priceless. What? She called out. Even Irina could not suppress a small grin at the expression of the fallen angel as she found out how far she had been deceived. Rainer sent a glance to Asia, who in return however only smiled at her innocently. She wanted to growl at Gariel. But what she brought out was not far more than a whisper. She took another short look at Asia. Okay. You are right, she finally said. It is truly better this way, she admitted quietly. Both Issei and Irina noticed this, and in Issei's case also how different Rainer sounded from her usual sarcastic and confident, arrogant self. They all continued to listen as Gariel explained the rest of the events that had led them all here. The part she was saying in this moment caught everyone's attention. As I have said, she stated, my organization doesn't like or trust the devil faction. Their habit to take over entire towns in the human world and claim them as their territory, had marked these places as targets to their enemies. To that comes that they are turning humans and other races into devil servants. All too often without ever actually asking them or giving them a choice, practically enslaving them. Some of these servants then rebel and become stray devils, and the devils hunt them down and kill them, all too often here on Earth. As you can probably imagine, all that makes our duty to protect this world only more difficult. So the guardian standing towards the devils is not exactly a friendly one. To put it simply, We didn't want a successful alliance between the houses of Phoenix and Grimoire. That would only strengthen the devils and they would probably cause even more trouble for us. And we especially didn't want a devil of Razor's known attitude to gain even more influence than he already has. But since none of us is a member of the devil faction, we couldn't interfere in their internal politics. At least not without revealing much more of our organization to them as we were willing to. But Rias Grimoire had provided us with a way to get a foothold into devil society. I had offered a deal, that she and her servants would hold freed Selzen for us and in exchange we would assist her in her problem with Razor. If she invited us to their meeting, to get us into a position where we could challenge him in the first place. Do I get this right? Zenobia asked her. You got this devil and her peerage to guard one of the most dangerous stray exorcists for you, and in exchange you offered her something that you were planning to do anyway. On top of that you used her as an entrance card into devil society. And all that right after you deceived the fallen angel leaders into thinking Ossia Argento had lost her sacred gear and convinced everyone else that she was dead. If you put it in that way. Yes, Gariel answered, now sounding a bit insecure. Raynor's comment said it in the best was what most of the people around were thinking. God, and people say I am a lying bitch. But you make me look like a poor amateur, she remarked. Issei could not even deny it. There was truth about what Raynor had just said. For the first time, he felt how small doubts were rising up inside of him about his friend and trainer. Gariel was doing everything for everyone's best, he knew that, for the greater good, if you put it that way. But could he really trust someone who manipulated people that easily and often? Backquote that she has an impressive pair of breasts doesn't automatically make a girl trustworthy. That were her own words. Rias and her peerage, Razor, Raynor and her team, Irina and Zenobia, his parents, she had lied to practically every one of them at one point or the other during the last days. He and Asia were the only exceptions. Really? Was he sure about that? He asked himself. Could there maybe be things she kept from him as well? XXXXXXX the evening of the same day, a few hours later. After the two important meetings from the day before, Rias Peerage had now returned to daily business that they had failed to complete so far. In this case it was the hunt for a stray devil that they had been requested to eliminate, but who had survived their first encounter a few days ago. The same one who had been hiding in the building that they had now left to Issei's team. The devil Visor had killed her former master, fled the underworld and had since then been attacking, killing and even eating a large number of humans. The building had been her hideout, where she had brought and devoured her victims, until Rias Peerage had driven her out a few days ago. Right now she was running through the park of the city. Ironically not so far away from the place where Issei Hyodo had died a few days before. In the moment she was once again in the form of a young woman, instead of the monstrous being that she had become. She knew the resident devils had found her. They had been hunting her for days. Visor was clad in a long raincoat that she had taken from the last human she had killed, shortly after their fight with her that she had barely escaped from. She knew she had to get out of the city and as far away as she could, and that as quickly as possible. The last time she knew she had barely gotten away with her life. Damned devils, all she wanted was her peace and a few humans to feast on. Was that too much asked for? For a few short seconds, she actually allowed herself to believe that she had lost them. Moments later she was shown the opposite when she was hit by a burst of lightning. The stray devil was screaming in pain and could barely keep herself on her feet as the assault was over. They did that, she knew. It was one of the servants of this Grimoire bitch who had that kind of power. Moments later they showed themselves. Akano came gliding down from the roof of a neighboring building with her wings and Kaneko appeared from between the group of trees in front of her. It was only two of them, Visor realized. That meant she had a good chance. It seems we have finally found you again, Akano addressed the stray devil. It wasn't exactly smart of you to take this shortcut, was it? You should have known that we could attack you here without holding back. This time you won't escape. She smiled at her. This only caused Visor to attack them in an even greater rage. Her stolen coat was torn to shreds as she once again took her other monstrous form. The magic that their fight unleashed could of course be detected by other supernatural beings. Much to their bad luck. XXX Rias and the others instantly knew their exact location. But they were not the only ones. XXX. The fight had so far taken only a few minutes. But both Rias Peerage members and the stray devil were already showing visible damage. Nothing too serious, in first sight just scrapes and bruises. They all noticed someone else appearing through a magic circle close by. For the first moment Akano and Kaneko weren't worried that this was just the rest of their team who arrived. Until they noticed that the presences weren't devils at all. No, they were. Before any of them could think anything else, they were hit by nearly a dozen light spears. The equally surprised stray devil was hit through the chest and upper body by 3 spears at the same time and died near instantly. Akano was able to avoid the assault. As she looked around, however, she saw that her partner had less luck. XXX. Kaneko knew she had been lucky. It was some instinct that told her to move in the last moment, or it would have been her head that had been hit instead of just her shoulder. Injured for the second time, in just a couple of days, she thought. As they looked upwards, they saw a trio of fallen angels, standing on the tops of the trees surrounding them. One of them was a man, wearing a dark-colored trench coat and a hat, another was a blue-haired woman in a very tight, and very short, business suit, and the last one looked like a very young girl in a gothic Lolita outfit. What made it even worse, was that along with them a group of 6 men had shown up, who seemed to be stray exorcists. Ah, what do we have here? A few devils trying to kill each other, Donasik announced. You know, we have been trying to track you down for some time now, and here is the chance for an interesting fight. Even if one of you is already done for, he said, looking in the direction of Visor's dead body. Now, how about we take over for her? He asked. Akano and Kaneko knew they had problems. XXXXXXX. About a half-kilometer away, Murayama didn't know what to think. No, that was more than an understatement. Right now she wasn't even completely sure anymore what goddamn fucking planet she was on. She knew that the habit she had developed to keep an eye on Issei Hyodo and follow him around whenever she saw him somewhere was, well, somewhat questionable. Or more than that. But even in her wildest dreams she would have never imagined to see what she just did. The same boy she had been trying to subtle, or maybe not so subtle, observe for the last days, had just appeared only a minute ago from an empty street corner, along with not just 1 but 2 girls. That alone was a bit strange given his reputation. She saw that they were going in the direction of the park. At night, she asked herself. Murayama decided to follow him once again. But it was what she saw then what truly blew her mind and made her question her own sanity. As they had arrived at the park, that was of course completely empty at this time of the day, the 2 girls suddenly changed, transformed. Both of them were suddenly growing black feathered wings on their backs and changed their appearance and clothing. One of them was now even wearing something that looked like a strange dominatrix outfit. What was going on here? She felt as if she had gotten herself into some sort of manga. And issei. She saw how a bizarre-looking device suddenly appeared out of nowhere on his left arm. This place, why does it have to be this place? She heard him saying as he looked in the direction of the park. But of course she had no idea what he meant. What in the world was going on here? She asked herself again, looking at the strange group who had just managed to shatter her perception of reality. She felt how she was once again walking after them, as she saw them running, or in case of the 2 girls actually flying. Further into the park, in the direction where she could hear some loud noises coming from. If she had not been under shock from what she had just seen, if she had her senses still completely together, then they would have probably told her that this was a very stupid idea and that she should have better run in the other direction. But as things were, she couldn't overcome her curiosity. Donasik admitted, when he received the orders to go after the devils he had been happy. Finally, the chance for a real fight instead of hiding and working in secret. Besides being the only male, he was also the oldest member of Rainer's former group. In fact, he had been alive since before the end of the Great War. Of course he had been a no-name fighter back then, only one of the countless faces in the mass. Still, sometimes he nearly missed those times. At least back then things were clearer than they are now. He was one of the supporters of Lord Kokobeel's more aggressive course, instead of Azazel's newer peace policies. In the end only came down to giving in to their enemies whenever some sort of dispute came up. At least Kokobeel was willing to stand up for their race, even if it could mean a new conflict. As the humans would say it, Better risk to die on your feet than live on your knees. Or something like that. Of course, someone like Raynor, with her blind devotion to Azazel, could just not see that. In her eyes, he was still the leader from the Great War. A man who no longer existed since before her life even began. Azazel's fangirl. That's how she was called under the hand by some people in the ranks. It was not hard to suspect that she might have secretly hoped to become one of his concubines. Well, wherever Azazel had sent her to, he hoped she was happy with it. Donasek, for his part, was glad that things here were now finally getting his way. He had been sick of the endless laying low, the waiting and hiding. He ached for some action, for an active mission, a fight, and now he finally got his wish. They had taken the 3 devils by surprise and already killed one of them. Ironically, the stray the other 2 were fighting against, and wounded another. Together with their remaining exorcist group, they have them cornered the last uninjured devil. She had defended herself with her lightning power quite well. Oh yes, he was aware who she was, Baraquile's traitorous daughter, and now the queen, of the Grimoire heiress. She and the smaller white-haired girl were still putting up a fight. But they were attacking them from all sides. But as it turned out, Baraquile's brat had some actual fighting skills. She managed to kill 2 of their stray exorcists with a powerful burst of lightning. Her already wounded comrade was able to take another one down. Defeated by an injured child devil, he didn't know if he should pity the man for his death or for his weakness. The small girl herself, however, was also looking as if she could barely stand anymore. Both the wound and the light that had entered her body were obviously taking their toll on her. It was probably only a short time until she would collapse. And as it looked, they would not even need the reinforcements that Lord Kokabile had promised them. Nearly the same moment, however, Calawarner was hit by another powerful burst of lightning from the traitor, through a mixture of simple luck, or bad luck in Calawarner's case, and Akino's expertise. The fallen angel let out a terrible scream as the high-level electricity ripped through her body and she fell crashing to the ground. She continued to use her lightning at her for a few more moments to the already injured opponent, causing even more damage. Normally she would be laughing about the painful-looking attack she had just landed on one of the enemies, and even now she couldn't hold back a grin. But she knew the situation was more than serious. She herself barely managed to survive one more barrage of light spears. She dodged another spear, until she was finally hit as well. She saw that it had pierced clean through her leg. This was it, she thought. Kaneko didn't look as if she could fight for even another minute. And neither would she against so many opponents. Unless help would arrive very quickly, they were both dead. A few seconds later, Kaneko collapsed and Akino herself had already sank to her knees. Right then, another magic circle appeared a short distance from them all. But their short moment of hope that the others had arrived was nearly instantly dashed as they realized that the circle was not from the Grimoire clan, but one they had ever seen before, and when they saw that the figure appearing before them was yet another fallen angel. The newcomer was looking over the fighting place. "I see you have already done most of the work without me," he said. "Sartale-sama." Donasek greeted him, a bit surprised. "Lord Kokabile didn't say that you would come in person." "No, you have just been given the necessary information," the man replied. "But as I see, one of them is still standing." He was looking at Akino, who was struggling to move with her wounded leg. The stranger spread his black feathered wings. His 3 pairs of wings. 6 wings, Akino thought. This was a higher-level fallen angel. The stranger attacked her and took her down with one move, and only a small gesture, as if squashing an insect. He didn't use a light spear. Instead, he formed with his hand a small globe of what looked like concentrated light energy. He threw it at her and Akino was thrown to the ground with visible burn wounds. "2 devils less to stain this world," the man named Sartale commented as he was looking at them. "Now, would you please finish them off, Donasek?" He let his gaze wander over the fighting site. "But there is one last thing," he said. Without any warning, he fired another attack, directly at the 3 remaining stray exorcists. That was left behind was nothing but burning remains of flesh. Donasek and Mittelt were, to say the very least, more than a little bit unsettled about this. Sartale, who they knew as the right hand of Lord Kokabile himself, had just killed 3 of their allies without a moment of hesitation. Of course, the exorcists were basically only hired guns, but they were still on their side. So what purpose did this serve? Good. One loose ends less, Sartale stated. Then there is only one thing left. He looked at the wounded Calawarner. Kill her, he said. What? Donasek asked in shock. What are you talking about? She is one of us. The others, including Calawarner herself of course, who was staring at him from the ground, unable to even say anything, could also barely believe what they were hearing. Yes. That is exactly the point, the six-winged fallen replied. What do you mean? Donasek angrily asked him. Let us say, to reach what is best for our faction, sacrifices have to be made, Sartale told him. You are one of the people who understands that. A new war is unavoidable, and should start better soon than later. But just the loss of these two pathetic servants will not hit the devils hard enough. They will just whine a bit and do nothing. That stupid brat that had been handed control of this town by her brother, will just get two other "evil pieces" and simply turn two other idiots to replace these two. He was fully aware that the two Grimoire servants were still conscious and heard every word he was saying. But he didn't care. Should these two filthy devils know how worthless their lives were, even to their own people? On our side, they will be willing to compromise and make amends. Just like always under Azazel's leadership, he said with disdain. Not that the devils would ever make any amends to us though, he remarked. But if the devils killed one of us and an entire group of our exorcists in an unprovoked ambush, and we killed some of them in return. Let us say that many of our people are also having enough of always giving in to the devils. And if a few such incidents happened. Bastard! Akino spat at him as she heard what he was saying. Donasek was known to be a ruthless fighter under the Grigori. Always starving for some real combat and not giving any quarter to the enemy. But that is enough, he said. This is madness. Calawarner may be a dumb bitch sometimes, but she is a member of my team. I won't do it. You are crazy. Wait till Lord Kokabeel hears about this. Without another word or a moment of hesitation, Sartale moved and shot him with the same attack he had used against Akino earlier. Lord Kokabeel was the one who had ordered it, you fool, he stated as he looked down at him. Now it looks as if we get one martyr more for our cause. What do you think? Mittelt. That was your name, wasn't it? He turned to the last member of the group. Are you with me? He grinned, or are you with them? He pointed at Calawarner and Donasek, who were desperately trying to stand up again, to do anything to defend themselves. She said nothing for a few moments, just looking at him fearfully. I am with you, Sartale-sama, she answered then, visibly intimidated. Good. In this case prove your loyalty. Kill one of them. I don't care which one. I will just take the other. The truth was he had been intending from the beginning to have at least two of them killed. Lord Kokabeel's original plan had actually been to sacrifice the entire group. They were all only cannon fodder anyway. But his own team could also need some extra help for the things that are coming. So he decided that he would take the one who was most willing to get along with his way. He would have never expected it to be the small gothic Lolita though. Actually he thought it would be Donasek. But as it turns out he didn't have the guts to do what was told to do. Mittelt now formed a light spear in her hand and stepped closer to Calawarner. You know, when I think about it, I never really liked you, she said to her. And those oversized boobs of yours were always getting on my nerves. Maybe I should just cut them off before I finish you, what do you think? A wicked grin now formed on her face. You little bitch, Calawarner hissed. Donasek was standing up again, intending to not go down without a fight. Ah, a fighter after all, Sartale commented. Only one too sentimental to be of any use to us. In this moment another transport circle appeared before them. This time however it was actually the rest of the Grimoire peerage who had just teleported in. The angel called Sartale however only grinned when he saw their arrival. It seemed a far better prey than these two devil slaves here had just come. If he killed the sister of one of the mouse, it would be far more efficient than just this charade here. Rias on the other hand was quickly losing her courage, now as she saw their opponent. 6 wings. What in the world was someone like that doing in her town? She knew they were outmatched. He instantly attacked them. XXXXXXX as issei, Gariel and Raynor arrived, less than a minute later, nearly Rias' entire peerage was down, just like Donasek and Calawarner. Only she herself was still standing, barely. It was clear that she had no chance at all. The only reason she was even still able to fight was that, until a few moments ago, she had Kiba at her side. That and that their opponent didn't seem to be very serious at all. They saw the six-winged fallen angel who had obviously been dominating the fight. Neither Issei and Gariel had ever seen him before. No wonder in Issei's case, but Gariel had been an angel of heaven and a guardian. But Rainer, as a member of the Grigori, did have. Issei, be careful. I know this man. He is very dangerous, she warned him. Issei had heard her. Trusting her was of course another matter. But dangerous or not, he would not simply let this guy kill all the others, even if he had issues with most of them. Hey! He shouted at him. Ah, so you have arrived as well. Sartale greeted them as he turned around in their direction. The group Lord Azazel currently have dealings with, he stated casually. Issei saw Rias' gaze shift to him for a moment as their enemy said this. Rainer. Danasik asked in surprise as he recognized her. What are you doing here? Danasik. She greeted him with a good bit of sarcasm. Now, what is this? I am gone for just a few days and everything goes downhill, she asked, grinning smugly. He nearly growled at her, but calmed himself down. If she and the others were saving his ass here, then he would gladly accept a few smart comments from her. Issei saw their short exchange as well. The Rainer he knew and loved, was obviously back now, after her breakdown from yesterday. But right now that was the least of his worries. He turned to Rias. We will talk about this later, he said to her. We have other problems to deal with. She nodded. Oh, and what do you want to talk about? Sartale asked them mockingly. Maybe about the fact that you Issei Hyodo and this fallen angel there, he pointed at Gariel, are both members of a secret organization that has its origin in another universe. An organization that is working in dozens, maybe hundreds of parallel worlds and that has now made a secret agreement with Lord Azazel. How are you usually called? Oh right, the Guardians. And I guess our friend Rainer here is a new recruit as well, right? Sartale announced. Rias and her peerage were just looking gobsmacked at what he just said, their eyes wandering between Issei and Gariel and him. How did you? Gariel asked completely aghast. In the next moments she realized that it was probably not a god idea to say it like that. Don't tell me this crazy story is true. Rias called out. Shit, she thought. She should have followed the same advice she had given Issei and learned to just keep her big mouth shut. How do I know about all this? Sartale repeated. You could say I have some kind of source. And it is not the only thing I know. How about this sacred gear holder Ossia Argento who you have saved and are hiding here right under the devil's nose? It was Lord Kokabeel himself who told me this. This caused even more awkward looks from Rias and the others. Like Issei said, we will talk about this, but not now, Gariel told them. Okay. The devil replied. But we will talk. Look out, Issei exclaimed. Sartale fired another of his attacks on her, hoping to catch her off guard. But the Grimoire devil avoided it, barely. He knew the situation from just few minutes ago had completely changed. Of course he was easily superior to every single one of them on their own. But all of them together. He admitted he wasn't so sure. By talking about the information of the Guardians he had been given, he had hoped to create a rift between these two allies. To turn them against each other. And while he certainly succeeded to sow some mistrust, it wasn't enough to bring them apart, yet. Tell me, fallen angel, what are you doing here? Rias asked him. This is devil's territory, and you are attacking my servants. Rias, this guy wants to kill us, Akino called out to her, and also his own allies as well, and then blame it all on us. He wants a new war and he wants to make it look as if we are responsible. Hearing this angered the Grimoire heiress only even more. You would sacrifice your own allies like that. As if you wouldn't do the same thing if it suits your needs, devil, he replied. But we both know just killing two of your servants wouldn't give my lord what he wants. You on the other hand. If I kill you by yourself you might be only a weak pathetic brat. But it is your family that makes you important. Imagine, just your useless little life, he told her mockingly, letting the words hang in the air. Rias didn't know what enraged her more, his insults against her or his claim that she would sacrifice her own servants. It made no difference anyway. He was attacking once again, throwing light spears and small globes of energy at them. And the one fallen angel who, as it seemed, had decided to side with him was backing him up now. XXX, the teenage girl who was standing in a short distance to them, hiding in the shrubbery between the trees close by, could still not believe what she was seeing. She had been following her classmate Issei because she was convinced that something strange was going on with him. But what she had found was nothing else than a fight between monsters. Supernatural creatures. There was no other way how she could call it. She had heard the terms devil and fallen angel being shouted by the beings before her. And Issei Hyodo was right between them. Murayama didn't quite know what to think or to do. XXX, the fight was still going on. Despite being hopelessly outnumbered, in the moment it was Issei, Gariel, Rainer, Rias Grimori, Donasi and Kiba, who just managed to get up again, against only him and Mittelt. Sartale was still quite confident that he could reach what he wanted. Half of them were already damaged. But he was also starting to get tired. He cursed himself in part for toying with the devils earlier. Otherwise this would already be over. But he also had another, easier solution, left. He threw another couple of attacks in their direction which they all easily evaded. But he used this chance to make another move. In a split second he had gone from the place he had been before and was now standing at a small group of trees around 24 meters away. But he was not alone. Most of them recognized the girl he was holding in his grip. It was Murayama. Issei saw it as well. What was she doing here? She must have followed him, he realized. He had known about the curiosity she had developed about him. He had planned to talk with her about it, but didn't came to it yet. Gariel and Rainer had taken position next to him. Both having formed light spears and pointing them at their opponent. Ah, who do we have here? Sartale asked, while Murayama was struggling to break free from him. But of course she had no chance against the hold of the fallen angel. Hyodo-kun, she called out as she saw him. Can it be that you know this girl? Sartale asked. He had felt the presence of a human close by. Given that it was in the middle of the night in the park, none of them had actually bothered to create a barrier to keep intruders away. He had intended to take whoever it was as a hostage. But this seemed even better as he had hoped. She is a student of the same school as you, isn't she? He questioned. One last time, it does not have to be like this. Hyodo-san. Just step aside and leave this devil to me, and I will let this girl go. We don't have to be enemies. Believe me, she and her kind are scum that needs to be exterminated. Don't even think about it, Gariel said. You know I can't stand these devils myself. But if the sister of one of the mouse dies through the hands of a fallen angel, it could maybe cause a new war. Issei was clenching his teeth. He knew she was right, even if he hated it. But Murayama was only here because of him. Well, I guess that means no. A pity, Sartale said. Issei needed, to do something. He knew he was about to see one of his classmates die, all because she had been curious about what he had been doing. He rushed forward as fast as he could, with superhuman speed. But his enemy was even faster. In the moments Issei had reached them, he had already formed a light spear and stepped it right through Murayama's heart. All he could do was catch the dying girl in his arms. Sartale draw back as attacks from Rainer, Gariel and Rias hit him. But none was strong enough to cause any lasting damage. No, Issei stammered as he saw the state of his classmate. Murayama was looking at him. Her lips were moving as if she wanted to say something. But she couldn't anymore. A moment later she was dead. Issei was in shock. He could only think one thing. It's all my fault. If he had been more careful, if she hadn't been following him, if he had taken the time to talk to her earlier. If only. He felt tears flowing from his eyes. He truly was an idiot. Nothing but a perverted fool. Don't blame yourself, partner. He heard Deidreg's voice in his head. You couldn't have known that she would follow you to this place. Remember, you had good reasons why you didn't had a chance to talk to her earlier. You had other things and other people to worry about, Asia Argento. Freed Selzen, your actions saved many. This won't help Murayama, he replied. No, but it helped all the other people whose lives were saved, including Asia. Issei remembered every moment he had spent in school next to this girl, every time he talked to her, even the times she attacked him for peeking on her. This would now never happen again, all because of that bastard. And he felt his sadness turn into anger and rage. Issei felt how energy was slowly building up inside him, how it was taking form and concentrating, here right in the palms of his hands. He laid Maruyama's body to the ground and stood up. He remembered at this point that maybe Rias would be able to bring her back as a devil. If she was willing to do that. But it would still not be the same. She would no longer be human, she would have to be her servant. No, it would not be the same. And it would not just erase the fact that she died here. He had never been this angry before, not even as Rainer had killed him or as he heard about her plans to kill Asia. What got to him most was the pure senselessness of it. Whatever selfish motives she also had, Rainer actually believed that possessing the Twilight Healing would be a great help for her people, and she had been willing to kill Asia over it, something he truly had a hard time forgiving her for. And she had killed him because she had been given actual reason to believe that he could a threat to both her plans, and to the people around him. As much as her decisions angered him and her betrayal hurt him, he could at least in a twisted way understand why she acted like that. But this. He had taken her hostage. But it was already clear that they would not simply hand over Rias Grimoire. There has been nothing to win for him by killing her, nothing to gain. It was completely pointless. He just did it because he could. Just because they had refused to give in to his demands. Because they didn't let him have his way, to give Rias to him to be killed. Is saw how his entire rage was released in form of a large blast of energy that he fired from his hands and was directed at their enemy. Sartale, just like everyone else, was completely surprised by this attack, as the blast hit him and sent him flying straight through a line of trees, before he was finally slammed into the ground. Sartale-sama, Mittelt called out, more out of fear for herself than of actual worry, since she had just openly betrayed her comrades. What was that? Issei asked himself. Dragon shot is one of the techniques of the boosted gear. Drake explained. But this was somehow different. Far more powerful as it is meant to. It wouldn't be the first time your powers worked a bit different as they used to. You mean like with my short fight against Kiba? Yes. Issei saw that most of the others were staring at him with open mouths. I have to say I am impressed, Rainer commented. To think that I ever thought of you as a weak human. In some distance, however, they saw that Sartale was coming up once again. He showed visible burn marks on his body and his wings seemed to have taken some damage. But he seemed to have survived the attack without any greater injuries. In this moment, however, something else changed about the entire situation. From the direction where Issei's and his group's temporally base was located, they saw three figures running in their direction. It was Irina and Zenobia, and a few meters behind them, Asia. The two exorcists were now dressed in leathern combat clothing and had their swords drawn, while the former nun stayed in some a bit greater distance away. You two were meant to stay and keep an eye on the base, Gariel reminded them. We thought you could use help, Irina replied. And beside that, we don't take orders from fallen angels, Zenobia added, even if they are on our side. Whatever, it is good that you are here. And as you can see, we have some injured here, that means you could help as well, Asia. Rainer might have a hard time to heal them all alone, Gariel told her. She got strange looks from the two exorcists for saying Asia's name like this in front of the devils. They didn't know that their enemy had already blown their secret. Issei, however, had other things on his mind. He could only look at the girl lying before him. She was dead, because of him. He would not simply accept this. There had to be something that could be done. After all, he came back as well. Yes. He suddenly remembered. The memories that Gariel had transferred to him. Under them was also the knowledge of a technique, the same one that had brought him back. He felt the energy building up inside of him again. But this time he would use it for something different than an attack. XXX Sartale, from his point of view, saw that on top of everything else he had now two holy sword wielders against him as well. It was enough. Mittelt, he said to her, we are leaving. Yes. Sartale-sama, she replied. Magic circles appeared beneath both of them and one moment later they were gone. XXX they were gone. Rainer, Asia, could you please heal the others? Gariel asked them. Both, the fallen angels and the devils, she said in Rainer's direction. Of course, the other fallen angel replied sarcastically, I wouldn't dream about leaving these poor devils to suffer. Not that they would lift a finger for me if I were in their situation. Many of them had heard this comment, but nobody said anything. The devils of course noticed that there were in fact two people who possessed the power of the twilight healing. How this was possible was another question. Asia was just about to heal Kiba. For a short moment she saw him giving a short very sharp glance at Zenobia, who was standing close by and still holding her sword in her hands. Or maybe she had been wrong, Asia thought. A second later Kiba was back to his normal self and thanking her for her help. Rainer had just healed Calawarner and was now turning her attention to Kaneko, while Asia was healing Akano. Danasek was the one with the least severe injuries, so they would wait for him till the end. They turned to Issei. They remembered the girl who was with him. But they knew for her all help was probably too late. Issei. I could. Rias was just about to offer him to resurrect this girl. Sure, she didn't have a sacred gear or another source of power, but given all he had done to help her, even with the grudge he had against her, this was the least she could do for him. But then she and the others saw what he was doing. He was kneeling over Maruyama's body and a bright glowing white light was shining from his hands. Then he lowered them on her and let the energy flow into her. For a few moments nothing happened, before she started to move again. First it seemed as if a shock went through her limbs that caused her entire body to suddenly cramp. Then they saw that she slowly began breath again. The wound through her chest started to heal on a rapid rate. But she still showed no sign of waking up, lying unconscious before them. The others could once again only stare in disbelief at him. Aiz-kun, what have you done? Asia asked him. You can bring back the dead. Rainer questioned. Gariel sat down next to Issei, who was still on his knees before the reanimated girl. She used her supernatural senses, all of them, to check and examine her as good as she could. As she found what she had suspected, she turned to her partner. Issei, she began. I wanted her to live, he said. I just wanted her to live. Yes, she will live, Gariel repeated. Forever, she said a bit sharper. What? Issei asked, now surprised. The technique that you used is normally meant to recruit new guardians. It transfers some of the guardian's inherited energy into you, that merges with your own and reconstructs and enhances the body's functions. In opposite to that, for example the devils, you stay the same species. But the new recruit is turned immortal in the process, she explained hastily. It is the same technique Darien used for you. But he modified it to make sure you keep your human lifespan, so you could eventually return to a normal life if you wanted. In opposite to you, however, he actually knew what he was doing. She is still human, technically, but she will never age a day for the rest of her existence, and we are lucky if that is the only anomaly, she added. What do you mean? Issei asked, now worried. The energy you have transferred into her might be unstable, she stated. Issei felt as if he had been punched in the gut. Unstable. He knew all too well what this could lead to from his talks with Diedrag and Rainer. Had he actually brought Maruyama back only to get her killed again in the long run? Issei. Something about her demeanor changed. I am sorry that I was talking to you like that. I know you mean well. It is just. I am not sure about this either. I have never used this technique myself. I am not an expert. We need to bring her to the others. You mean the other guardians? Yes, we should visit the home universe of our organization, she told him. This of course piqued the interest of everyone around them. There is also another reason why we should meet with them, Gariel pointed out. This Sartale, he knew about us. That means someone must have told them, very likely someone from the other side, our enemies. XXXXXXX Kuo Academy. It was less than an hour later that they were all assembled in front of the school. Issei and his group were standing on one side, the devils on the other. However, it was not only Rias Peerage who they were already acquainted with, but Sona's as well. I believe you have not been officially introduced yet, Rias said to Issei and the others. Sona is the heir of the Citri family and the sister of the current Mao Leviathan, as you probably know. It is a pleasure to meet you, Sona greeted them in her typically stoic manner. That means of course officially in your case Hyodo. As I remember we have met several times before. Yes, he actually remembered several times she had warned him off, Issei thought. Normally he would probably make a comment about that. But with the girl that was lying still unconscious in his arms, he had other things on his mind right now. Murayama was alive, again because of what he did. But by what Gariel had told him, she was now in an unstable state, also because of him, and needed to be looked at by someone who knows more about this form of reanimation. More than either he or Gariel did. That meant they needed to meet with the other guardians. The ones who were outside of this world. But for the moment they were still stuck here, explaining the situation to Rias and the other devils. Gariel had told him that she had already contacted them and that they would prepare a transport to a place where they could get help. XXX after they had just returned from the fight, Calawarner and Donasik in tow, they had waited for Sona and the others, and then Issei and Gariel had given them a short explanation about who and what the guardians were, more or less the same short explanation Issei himself had received in the beginning. They also told them of what they had found out about Kokobil's conspiracy and his connection to the terrorist organization they were tracking down. To say these devils were stunned would be the understatement of the year. A powerful faction that they didn't know about, that had its roots far away from their world. It is good that you have finally told us all this, Rias said to them in a friendly tone. I am sure now that we know who and what your organization is, we will get along better. Indeed, now that we are starting to know each other, I am sure we will be able to build up a friendly relationship, Sona stated. I would seriously doubt that. Gariel scoffed. To be honest, the Guardians were never on good terms with the devils, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But you are on good terms with the fallen angels? Sona asked now more aggressively. Rias told us that you made some kind of deal with Azazel. Hardly on good terms, she responded. In fact, the Grigori didn't even knew about our existence until a few days ago. I might technically be a fallen angel myself, but I have never been a part of them. And they still don't actually know who we are. Still, there are many things wrong in the Grigori, I am the first to admit that. But it is not nearly as much as in your society. Since you are a fallen angel yourself, technically or not, it doesn't surprise me that you say this, Sona replied dryly. Okay. I want to know it now, Rias exclaimed angrily. What exactly is your problem with us? From the first time we met you always acted as if we devils are trash to you. You are kidding, right? Do you truly want a list? She asked. How about this for the beginning? Rogue fallen angels, stray devils, terrorists, if it wasn't for your arrogant claim that this entire town is your territory, beings like that wouldn't even show up here and endanger innocent people in the first place. And then you are standing here as if you deserve a medal for helping to fight these guys, while nothing of this would have happened if it weren't for you. Rias felt as if she had been slapped. She made it sound as if it was her fault what had happened to this girl. Sona looked as if she had taken the accusation a bit better, but she knew her well enough to know that it got to her as well. XXX the other two remaining members of the fallen angel group, Donasik and Calawarner, were standing in some greater distance away, not truly trusting the situation. Rainer had told them a few minutes ago about what she had heard from Friedselsen and what she had been told by Lord Azazel at the headquarters. It seemed nearly unbelievable, such a complete betrayal from one of their leaders, setting their entire team up to die, conspiring with a devil against them. But after what just happened with Sartale, they were all too willing to believe it. He had been willing to see them all dead for his goal of a new war. This was the man he had been following, Donasik thought, a madman. And now they were standing here, right in front of a devil stronghold, exhausted and confronted with what seemed to be two entire peerages, depending on whatever deal Rainer and her new allies had with these devils to survive. XXX. We will talk about this again another time, Gariel said to the two pureblood devils before her. I have contacted my group and they will open a portal that will lead us to the home world of our organization very soon. This is okay, Rias replied. But I fear before you can go, we will have to introduce you to 3 other guests who will arrive every moment. Other guests? Gariel asked. She didn't need to wait long for the answer. Less than 2 minutes later 3 more figures appeared in front of them, teleporting right from the underworld. The first was someone Issei and Gariel already knew, the silver-haired maid from the House of Grimoire, Gafia. The second was a tall young man with long red hair who was looking very much like a male version of Rias. And the third, they could barely believe it. It was a young woman in what was clearly some sort of magical girl outfit. May I introduce, Searsx Lucifer, Rias' brother and one of the Mao, Akino stated. This is Seraphal Leviathan, Sona's older sister, and Graphia, maid of the house of Grimory and Searsx queen, she said for the sake of the ones who didn't already knew the silver-haired woman. You have called your brother? Issei asked Rias accusingly. You have told him about us. Of course, she replied defensively. Put yourself in my situation. We have just found out about a new faction, one that is not even from this world. Think about the possibilities for my race. My brother is one of the Mao. How could I not tell him? Issei admitted she had a point here. He couldn't have expected her and Sona not to inform their siblings about something like this. But on the other side he was truly running out of patience. He wanted to bring Murayama to the Guardians as quickly as possible and had no time to talk to these people. Before Issei could continue this line of thought, however, something else happened. The girl, or rather Mao, in the magical girl outfit was throwing her arms around Sona and draw her into a hug. Sona-tan, I am so glad that nothing had happened to you. I was so worried when I heard about it, she exclaimed. Calm down, Oni-sama. It was Rias who had been attacked, not me, Sona replied, visibly trying to keep her voice down. But I still couldn't help to be worried, the girl, Mao replied, looking a bit as if she was pouting. Hello. It is nice to meet you all, she then turned to the others. As you have already been told, I am Seraphal Leviathan. But please just call me Levi-tan, she announced while taking a typical magical girl pose. All of them looked gobsmacked at the display, especially the fallen angels. Issei saw that Rainer had a grin on her face and looked as if she could barely hold herself back from bursting out into laughter. Even Gariel looked as if she could barely hold herself together. If this is a Mao, I have to ask myself why our people have not beaten them centuries ago, Danasik whispered to Kalawarner. But since they were standing a good dozen meters away from the rest, nobody took notice of this. So you are Issei Hyodo, the man introduced as Searsx greeted him. I have heard much about you. You did, Issei stated, not really caring much at the moment. That you have challenged Razor for example, and of course about this organization you are part of, he stated. Of course, Issei replied. And you are Gariel if I am not mistaken, a fallen angel who is not part of the Grigori but a member of the Guardian organization. As such we will not consider you our enemy. Our group leader Rainer here for that matter, Searsx explained. How courteous of you, Gariel replied with light sarcasm, and what can we do for you in return? We are just interested in peaceful diplomatic and political contact with your group, the Mao told her. You mean we are your first version of real-life aliens and now you desperately want to make first contact, she stated. In a sense you could put it that way, Searsx admitted. You are a group, a powerful group by what my sister told me, that possesses abilities and techniques we have never heard before. You even have access to other worlds, I have been told. Of course we are interested to know you better. You realize that my group is not exactly thinking highly about devils. Gariel asked him. Yes, I have heard about this, he replied. But I am sure we can work over this as soon as we both realize how much cooperation can give our two sides, he said diplomatically. And it might also give you an edge over your enemies, she commented. None of us wants a restart of the war between the factions, Searsx told her. But you have already made contact with the Grigori. So you could see this as just evening the odds. I truly don't want to interrupt you, Issei said to them, but we are planning to leave this world at this very moment. My friend here needs help and we are going to the place where she can get it. So if you could please spare this discussion for another time. I see. This is no problem, Searsx responded. Actually, we are planning to go with you. What? Gariel called out. Just like I said, we want to make contact. You can't honestly expect me to bring a group of devils uninvited directly in our headquarters, Gariel pointed out. You can forget that. I will tell my leaders about your request, and then they will tell me when they will meet with you. If at all, she thought. I truly hate to bring this up, Searsx said, but as I understand it your organization wants to keep their existence a secret, right? If we could talk to you quickly and make sure you have no hostile intention, I am sure we can keep your existence between me, Seraphal and the other Mao for the time being. But if we can't, I fear we will have to inform the rest of our society. With other words, you're blackmailing us, Gariel replied. You can see it as this. But we are only defending our own interests. If you are active in this world and especially in our territory, you understand that we want to know more about you, he stated. There is also the matter of the two fallen angels, he mentioned. As I understand, they had been part of an ambush for two of the servants of my sister. They had acted under orders from questionable elements inside the Grigori, Raynor told him, and they had been betrayed by their leader. I intend to recruit them as part of our group. But they aren't part of it yet, Sirzex argued. That means we don't necessarily have to give them the same immunity as you. Gariel, we have no time for this, Issei reminded her. Don't worry. The others will open the portal any moment, independent from this discussion here, she replied. Okay. She addressed the two Mao and the other devils. We will take you with us. All of you who wants to go. But after that I will guarantee for nothing, she told them. A few seconds later a large portal, a rift between the dimensions, was opening right in front of them. It was different from the ways the devils or the other factions used for transportation. But from the structure is quite similar. Issei and his group, together with Donasek and Kalawarner, stepped into the portal. Shortly followed by Sirzex, Serafal, Grafia and Rias with her peerage. Sona and her group had already agreed to stay behind to take care of things while they are gone. XXXXXXX The planet Earth in another universe, the year 2724. On some parts a bit quite unwillingly, combined group was just stepping out of the other end of the portal. From one moment to the other they found themselves in a different universe. What they were seeing was not really what they had expected. Where are we? Sirzex asked. We are on Earth, but another one as you are used to, London to be exact, Gariel informed him, and in the 28th century of this world. The last part of her statement took everyone by surprise. This was not only a different dimension, it was also from their POV, the future. They saw that this really seemed to be the outskirts of the English capital, but in no way as the one they knew. They could make out several futuristic-looking buildings and flying above them was something that looked like a space ship, before it was landing somewhere at the other side of the city. Once again nearly all of them could do nothing but stare, barely believing what they were seeing. This is so cool, Serafal said grinning. They noticed then several people standing only a short distance away from them. Issei recognized one of them as Darien, the same being who had brought him back to life. But this time he was obviously hiding his energy and seemed more like a regular human than a cosmic super being. But Issei knew what this man truly was. Behind them was a very large, a gigantic building that looked like a cross between an oversized mansion and a fortress. Gariel, Issei, Darien greeted them both. It is good to see you again. I see you have brought the others as well. Next to him were an old man with long white hair and a beard, two identical-looking red-haired women in leather clothing. Both could give Rias a run for her money in the hot department. A man with wild-looking black hair, a brown-haired young man and a very young-looking blonde woman in a light gray cloak, that was a bit similar to the ones that Irina and Zenobia were usually wearing over their combat clothing. But it seems there are some more guests as we have expected, Darien mentioned. Gariel opened her mind to him and one moment later he knew everything. Of course while he could have easily bypassed her mental shields if he wanted, he only did it with her permission. I see, he stated. You have to take a look at this girl, Gariel said to him, pointing at Mariama. Of course, he replied and took her out of Issei's arms. You are the mouse Sirzex Lucifer and Serafal Leviathan, Darien addressed the devils, and you want to establish diplomatic contacts with us. Yes, Sirzex replied. And for that you have invited yourself with some, let us say questionable methods, he stated, smiling at them. I admit. Yes, the Devil King answered. We are not exactly proud of it. We will see about that, Darien replied. But as you can see I have to take care of this girl right now. So I will send you to talk to my old friend Vlad. He is something that you could call our public relations expert, he told them, once again smiling. Saras, would you please bring these people to your master, he addressed the blonde woman in the cloak. Of course, he has informed me that he will return in a few minutes, she replied. Please follow me, she said to both Issei's group and the devils. Searzex, just like his sister, Graphia and even Seraphal, had tried to use their power and their senses to at least get a better impression of these people, even if not to directly manipulate them. But to Searzek's complete surprise, he found out absolutely nothing. It was as if his mental powers were not even working, or as if the shieldings these beings were so strong that they could completely neutralize them. Just who were these people? He could not help getting a bit nervous. Vlad. Issei was meanwhile thinking as they were all following the blonde woman. Where had he heard this name before? Your memory is not exactly perfect, is it, partner? Diedrag said. Vlad of Wallachia, also known as Vlad the Impaler, also known as Dracula. Oh yes. Him, Issei now remembered, the other man he had seen in his vision. Moment. They have a guy called Vlad the Impaler as their public relations expert. I got the impression that your friend Darian wanted to mess with them a bit. After all, they have basically blackmailed themselves in here. Have you not seen the smile on his face? Oh yes, Issei replied. I admit I am getting a bit curious or maybe nervous how this will turn out. About a minute later they had arrived at a small forest area close to the building where the other guardians had been waiting. Right before them opened another portal, very similar to the one they themselves had used, and walking out came the same red-dressed man with the crimson eyes Issei remembered. Ah, I see our guests have arrived, the man greeted them all, and as I have been told, Darian asked me to talk to them. Yes, master, the woman named Sarah said. May I introduce, my master Alucard, sometimes also simply called Vlad, also known as Dracula.